Hi everyone. Hi, my name is Chen,
Gina Montoya.
and we're here to do a presentation on the alternative methods to presenting, like what we're doing now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's begin.
So, the learning objectives that we have for you is to list 5 different presentation alternatives besides lecture and PowerPoint, to differentiate the essences of different alternative presentation methods, and select one or a combination of several of those alternative presentation methods for 2 different educational scenarios.
Yeah. So here's the module overview. First, we're going to talk about what those alternatives are. So, very obvious. So, we're going to give you a list of methods that are just really good for different scenarios, and then how to pick the best suited training methods based on the materials that you want to present. We're also going to show a case study, and we'll practice on the case study. We're going to just go through the whole flow of picking the methods and how to deliver the methods. And also the last one is a synthesis check. So let's dive right into the first alternative method other than PowerPoint. The first one is called scenario-based methods. And in this category, there are 2 types. There's a demonstration, there's a case study. Case study is something that I think a lot of people are very familiar with. Essentially, when you want to deliver a material, you choose the concepts and then you think about a specific situation that could happen in real life or artificial, and then you design it and ask the people around you to see if it's a good study or not and get some feedback, and then rewrite the case and develop case study discussion. Demonstration, on the other hand, is a very lively method. Essentially, you choose the concepts based on the materials that you want to deliver, and then you act it out. And by acting it out and by actually having audience over there, you can present your concepts in a very real life way. So essentially, it's a type of case study, but then in real life. And then you discuss the learning drama that was created and see if the demonstration is a good case or not. Next, we have the category called information inquiry-based methods. In this category, we have 3 types of methods. One is guided teaching, one is group inquiry, and one is information search. And all these 3 methods are about asking your students to inquire information as they're learning. So essentially, either they're working in groups or working individually. To promote people's curiosity and to promote people's motivation of learning, instead of just giving people answers directly, we give people questions and let people inquire information. So either in groups, or we give out an open book test for people to search the answers on their own. The guided teaching, on the other hand, it's a type of teaching that incorporates your learners. So you first ask a series of questions to the group before you deliver any materials, and then see what material the group know and what material the group don't know. By doing that, the group will guide you to teach. So this is the type of information inquiry based. The third type is group teamwork based methods. This one is, again, pretty frequently used in colleges or just in small groups. In general, it's always good to work with group and conducting some teamwork when you're learning. So first is study group, which is pretty straightforward. Group members learn the information on their own. You give some directions to the groups, and then the learning is all happening on their own. The jigsaw learning is a type of study group. It's a very specific type. And then, as you can see at the bottom, this is a diagram on how to do jigsaw. Essentially, you group your cohort into several groups of 4 or 3 or 5 of your choice, and then you let each group work on an individual concept, and then you will mix them up again, pick one representative from each group, and then regroup them into separate groups, so that each new group would have a representative from the previous groups, and then they will bring in the different concepts. So that's the type of jigsaw learning. And the learning tournament is also another fun way to do it, when you bring some competition in and group people, and people would start to get competitive, and that's a huge motivator of learning.
The next one you have that I worked on was experiential learning approach. And so this theory involves role-playing, games and simulations, observation, mental imagery, writing tasks, and action learning. And I did put the model up from David Kolb that talks about where this learning comes into play, breaking down the concepts. So you have the feelings, you have watching, thinking, and doing, and that's the experience that you get from each one of these learning approaches. One thing I did read in there is that you can't have a learner try to experience all of those at the same time. So if you see inside of the axes, you can pick from the two that are side by side, but you can't really put all of that information into one learning approach. So those are valuable when you're putting together these types of learning experiences. And I think most of them are self-explanatory. Mental imagery is basically like giving the scenario and then having them go through and like analyze what they would do in that activity. So they all are kind of pretty much the same, and I think we've all experienced them at least once in college. So breaking these down, I linked all these to showing where you get your learning experiences from. Feelings, thinking, doing, watching, doing, thinking, all of those activities. When you get this handout from us, the different color coding that's associated with the boxes, which is really light, identifies where those learning approaches work best, whether they're online or in person. So you'll have that information available to you. And then we get to the end of our learning experiences and what is the goal, or how are you going to do this? So how do I choose the appropriate training methods? Some important questions to consider would be is understand where your learning space is going to be. So you might come up with a model that you think is going to work really well, and then you show up and you're not allowed to move furniture around, or it's really small. So if you know that in advance, you can use you could be able to make a better decision on what method you want to learn. The next thing is do you need special material or resources? And with that, of course, do you have a budget? So some of these might cost some money to put together to be effective, and you need to think of that. The next thing is recognizing your audience. Do you have people that you think will be active participants right away, or are you going to have to work really hard to bring them out of their shell, where sometimes like the writing activity might be a better suited for them? Based on the content, is it difficult to grasp? Is it dull? Is it something everybody's excited to learn? That will also make a decision on which approach you go with. And then use a specific method when you want participants to be able to apply skill. So the role model, the demonstrations, you're giving them that experience that they're applying the skill. Some of them are more, how does it make them feel, behavior driven? So those are things to consider. And then the last thing is use a specific method when you want participants to tune in with their feelings. Those ones are when you're getting into the sensitive topics, and you really want them to not just be applying knowledge or skill to their trainees. You want them to be able to give the approach of it's sensitive topics. It's going to be something that they need to think about. So those are them. And then we move into our case study.
Yeah, so we want to go through a case study with you. Again, this is one way of presentation, and we mentioned that. So essentially, we're using this case study to learn how to use alternative methods other than just doing lecture and PowerPoint. So we attached a case study in our material, so please read it ahead of time. But essentially, this case study is about, so what we're showing on this slide right now is from one manager, and he wants his instructional designer to deliver all these key points in a very interesting way, because what he found was they used lectures before and it didn't work. So here are the key points, such as, this is on accounting, the difference between current and long-term assets, difference between current and long-term liabilities, very basic accounting principles. So how do we deliver it? So we want to go through this case with you. First of all, we have put all of the alternative methods that we have presented on the left. This is the list that we have mentioned. Based on this methods mentioned that we mentioned before, can you pick the top 3 appropriate methods to fulfill the purpose of this training? So we will encourage you to pause here and read through the case study and just think about which method you think would be good, and then how do you deliver that method? How do you use that method to deliver certain concepts? Do you want to use one method or a combination of several? What are the pros and cons? So please pause here and take a look. So we're glad that you went through that exercise, and here are the 2 methods that Gina and I picked to present this case and present the materials. Accounting is a very sophisticated concept, and it's a lot of almost boring concepts. So the 2 things that we thought were really good methods, one is case study. Case study will put you in a very realistic situation and really trigger your thinking, and then think about exactly what concepts you need to use for which one and the real applications. So that will also point out what mistakes you have made. So for the case study, essentially we follow the methods that we presented, or the procedure that were presented before. You prepare a written case of a owner of a business seeking help in preparing an income statement and balance sheet. So that could be the scenario, a very realistic scenario. And then you can have your students participate and complete the income statements and balance sheets. And if they get confused with this, they can talk to each other. And then it's good to always hold a discussion afterward to review the 2 processes and how they differ. And that's essentially the way to help people remember exactly the differences, because that's a common mistake that people used to make. We also think guided teaching is really good because this case is already, or the materials were already presented in lectures prior to this instructional design request, meaning that all of the students have already gone through the concepts, but they're just confused. So it's nice to use guided teaching to really understand what people know and what people don't know. So a way to do this first is we can provide a list of account balances of a real or a fictional company, and then we ask the students to select the accounts that should be reported on the income statement or balance sheets. So that's a prompt to really gather what people know and what people don't know. And if no one knows the answer, they encourage speculation. And then we present the correct list and ask the participants if they can figure out the basis of the 2 lists. So again, this help people to really walk through a real situation and then just think about when to use what.
And we get to synthesis checks. So with this one, we're just going to read through these. This is where we hope you've gathered some knowledge from us, and we've done transfer of learning. So the first one is list at least 5 different presentation alternative methods presented in this training module and write out the advantages of each. You can, of course, do this at your own pace, but this is something we want to make sure you've learned. The second one is describe 3 steps that you need to take before you choose an appropriate training method.
So the third one is another case study. It's a simpler case study, and we just want you to go through the process on your own. Essentially, the materials that we present here, it's a very simple list of the ways that you can improve meetings, and this is just one example. How would you deliver this material to your employees or your students? What would be the best way? Because simply presenting a list is very dry. So we encourage you again to use this slide, pick the top 3 methods that you think would be good. Again, list out the pros and cons, and do it on your own, and just think about how what would be the best way to deliver this. So that wraps up our presentation. We hope you enjoyed this.
Yep, and don't bore them with PowerPoint.
Thank you. Bye.